Madam, the recent spate of terrorist attacks in the UK is yet another grim reminder of the serious threats of radicalization and extremism. First, the threat to innocent lives. Let us be quite clear, whether it is an attack by a radicalized Muslim individual or an attack by an extremist Islamophobe, which happened in London a few weeks ago, all these are terror attacks which have no place in our society or any society, and they must be firmly condemned. As seen in the UK, terror attacks can take place anywhere, anytime. How do we completely guard against someone who decides to drive a car into a crowded public area? Or someone who goes on a stabbing rampage with a kitchen knife? These are very difficult security challenges which we and our counterparts around the world take very seriously. Mr. Ang Wei Neng and Mr. Zaki Muhammad asked about this. MHA, together with several other agencies, are reviewing existing security measures in public places, in particular against hostile vehicle attacks. Possible new measures include putting up bollards or security barriers. In evaluating the various options, we will take into account various factors, including function, in short, how effective will the measures be in addressing the threat, form, how the measures will fit into the surroundings and be part of the surroundings, and impact on users. Will the measures significantly restrict day-to-day usage of the space? We could try and fortify the entire city, but this is not a sensible or practical approach. We will have to strike a balance between enhancing security, which is very important, on the one hand, and the possibility of disrupting day-to-day activities through the imposition of curbs and restrictions, which will inconvenience users, on the other hand. These security measures will also come at significant cost to taxpayers. The government will need to make a practical assessment about the type and extent of measures we put in place to enhance security for Singaporeans. These measures will complement the laws and stakeholder engagement processes that we already have or will be implementing in the coming months. We amended the Public Order Act in April this year. Organizers of events that attract large crowds or are of higher risk are required to put necessary security measures in place. We will introduce a new Infrastructure Protection Act later this year to better protect critical infrastructure and large-scale developments. We will continue to work with the public and private sector stakeholders to enhance the security of buildings and public spaces. An updated version of the guidelines for enhancing building security in Singapore will be released later this year. Specific to schools, as Ms. Cheng Li Hui had asked, MHA works closely with the Ministry of Education. We keep MOE informed of the overall security threat, climate, and risks. Based on this, MOE works with us to review and calibrate the security measures for schools. It is important to put in place laws and other security measures to prevent an attack. But this is not sufficient. I now want to focus on the second threat of radicalization and extremism, which is the threat to our social fabric. This is less apparent than any immediate loss of life, but can be greatly damaging to our nation as a whole. The Minister of Home Affairs had spoken at length on various occasions about this. Today I'll speak on two specific groups which Ms. Cheng Li Hui and Mr. Christopher D'Souza asked about: schools and students, or students and school staff, and foreigners. Most of the Singaporeans who have been radicalized were younger than 30. Some were in their teens. They were mainly self-radicalized online. This is not surprising. Our youth consume a lot of information from the internet and social media. Radical preachers and terrorist groups know this. They exploit these media to spread their radical ideologies and terrorist propaganda. Our youth spend a significant proportion of their time in schools and educational institutions. Schools are therefore key platforms for us to counter these dangerous influences. We approach this from multiple aspects. First, the school curriculum. Through social studies and character and citizenship education lessons, MOE inculcates in our students values about living harmoniously in Singapore's multiracial and multi-religious society. MHA has also worked with MOE to incorporate counter-terrorism messages into secondary school curriculum. Second, the school environment. Our schools provide a supportive environment for our students to build strong, positive relationships with their peers and teachers from different races and religions. These social bonds are the strongest counter against any exclusivist or extremist mindset. Teachers and counselors also look out for students who display antisocial behavior. We do our best to intervene and provide guidance early to prevent such behavior from spiraling into more dangerous forms of extremism. MHA conducts workshops for teachers and counselors to sensitize them to the heightened threat environment, as well as increase their understanding of terrorist ideologies and telltale signs of radicalization. They play an important role in identifying students or co-workers who may be radicalized. Even as we put in all these measures, the responsibility of inoculating our young from radical extremist influences cannot be left to schools alone. Family members, friends, colleagues, religious leaders, and community leaders also play an important role, and I will come back to this later in my reply. Mr. Christopher D'Souza asked for an update on the threat by radicalized foreigners in Singapore. In 2015 and 2016, some 40 Bangladeshi nationals in Singapore were found to have been radicalized. They supported the use of violence to pursue the extremist ideology. We repatriated all of them to Bangladesh, except for 6 who are currently serving prison sentences in Singapore for terrorism financing offenses. Since 2015, we also uncovered 9 cases of radicalized foreign domestic workers. We updated the House on 7 cases in January this year. Since then, another 2 more have been detected. Similar to the earlier cases, both of them were ISIS supporters, radicalized through social media. One of them intended to travel to Syria with a foreign boyfriend to join ISIS. None of the 9 had plans to carry out acts of violence in Singapore, but we cannot condone support for any radical ideologies in Singapore, whether by locals or foreigners. All 9 have been repatriated to their home countries. MHA has worked closely with the Ministry of Manpower to address the threat of radicalized foreign workers. After the arrest of the radicalized Bangladeshi nationals last year, we prepared an advisory for foreign workers. We advised them to be alert, watch out for signs of radicalization amongst their co-workers, and to report any possible radicalization to the authorities. We will do more to sensitize our foreign workers to Singapore's multi-religious social values. This will take place throughout the time working in Singapore. Upon arrival in Singapore, all foreign workers are required to visit the MOM Services Centre. The education gallery in the centre will display messages that reinforce the dangers of radical ideologies, the need to be vigilant, and to report any suspicious activities or radicalized workers. Foreign domestic workers will be required to go through a settling-in program. They will be sensitized to the threat of radicalization and made aware that any form of radicalization will not be condoned in Singapore. In their dormitories, foreign workers will be regularly engaged by agencies such as the MOM, the Islamic Religious Council of Singapore, MUIS, and the Religious Rehabilitation Group, or RRG. They will be advised to call the RRG hotline should they require any advice for themselves or with regard to someone they know. MUIS is also looking to better manage the religious needs of Muslim foreign workers in Singapore. Foreigners are encouraged to seek religious advice only from ARS-accredited asatiza. They can attend religious classes at our mosques and will continue to be welcomed and included in activities in the mosque and the broader community. This will strengthen their understanding and appreciation of Singapore's multi-religious social values and norms. Madam Speaker, on the role of the community, we all know that SG Secure is our national movement to mobilize the community in our fight against terror. Mr. Ang Wei Neng asked if the current initiatives are sufficient. Ms. Cheng Li Hui and Mr. Christy Souza asked if more can be done. Through SG Secure, public vigilance has increased. The police have received many reports from members of the public on suspicious circumstances, from 999 calls and also via the SG Secure app. The public is paying closer attention to our surroundings and does not hesitate to make reports to the authorities. The public response to incidents such as the closure of Aokang and Woodland MRT stations in April 2017 was also encouraging. The large majority of Singaporeans understood the potential security threats and accepted the inconvenience caused as a result. MHA will continue to work towards strengthening community vigilance. However, SG Secure is not just about preventing a terrorist attack. More than that, it is about how we stand united as one Singapore to help one another after an attack. At the root of this is how we strengthen and safeguard our social fabric. MHA will continue to work with agencies like MCCY and the People's Association to implement community programs. For example, MCCY is establishing the SG Secure Community Network to strengthen partnerships with religious and community organizations to build greater mutual trust and understanding. The community plays a critical role in strengthening and safeguarding our social fabric. First, the role of family members in safeguarding against radicalization. We have made this point previously and repeatedly, but it is critical. We talked about the risk of online radicalization among our youth earlier in the reply. Family members and friends are in the best position to notice signs of radicalization. If an individual is spending excessive amounts of time on the internet, looking at suspicious, potentially radical material, or talks in praise of terrorist groups or about going overseas to take part in armed violence, family members and friends should alert the authorities immediately. This is a very difficult decision for any father, mother, brother, or sister to make. However, this must be infinitely better than losing a son or daughter, brother or sister forever to armed violence overseas or a suicide attack. Second, the role of religious leaders and community leaders in encouraging community integration. Religious and community leaders must step forward to play an active role through their speech and their deed. We were heartened to see that the National Council of Churches of Singapore, NCCS, had written a letter to MUIS in support of our Muslim community after the detention of Izzah, the radicalized female infant care assistant, was announced. The letter was made public. NCCS recognized the contributions of the Muslim community to Singapore's progress and the strength of our multi-religious community. It made clear its position that the detention must not be used to stoke the flames of Islamophobia in Singapore. Every religious and community leader has a role to play within their own communities. We strongly encourage religious leaders to emphasize multiracial, multi-religious values in their teachings and the importance of the various communities in Singapore interacting, understanding, and integrating with each other. Religious leaders can also take the initiative to organize activities with other religious groups. It can be as simple as a visit to a nearby place of worship of another religion to understand them, or sharing a meal with groups from other faiths. Third, the role of the individual in building stronger friendships with those of a different race or religion. We made this point when we talked about schools earlier, but it must go beyond schools. We must make an active effort to make friends with our neighbors and co-workers, exchange greetings, and celebrate our respective festivals together. We must safeguard and expand the common space where people from different races and religions can interact. These are the foundations of our social fabric which have brought us to where we are today, and we must protect them at all cost.